welcome. Thanks for joining us today. We're right here at the top of the hour. Looks like folks are still joining. We're going to give folks just a minute here to get joined, and then we'll get started. Yeah, and welcome to those just joining in. We're going to give people just a few more seconds here to join, and we'll get kicked off momentarily. Thanks. All right. Welcome, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. My name is Matt Harrell. I'm on the marketing team at Clearwave, and I'll be your moderator today. This is part 3 of our 3-part series on patients, profits, and practices. If you missed parts 1 and 2, we started off with a focus on patient acquisition. And then in part 2, we covered a bit about patient lifetime value and retention. Today, we're going to dive a little bit into key areas for scaling your practice. And just like previous sessions, we're going to keep this to about 15 minutes. The idea is to offer up a couple of pieces of insight and allow you to get back to your day. If you have questions as we go along here, feel free to drop those into the chat box, and we'll answer those if time permits at the end of today's session. So to jump right into what we're looking to cover today, I've got joining me 2 healthcare executives that spend a lot of time thinking about how to help practices grow and scale, perfect for today's discussion. First up, we're going to hear from Ty Allen, CEO of Social Climb. And in a few minutes, we'll bring in Lee Smith, Director of Partner Channels at Clearwave. If we move to the next slide, Ty's going to start us off with a brief overview of the marketing growth multiplier and ultimately how to align your marketing dollars with your most profitable service lines. And then we'll bring Lee into the conversation, and he's going to talk about how to deal with some of the most common challenges that growing practices commonly face as they grow and scale. So Ty, Lee, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. I know we promised 15 minutes here. Ultimately, people want to hear from you, not me. So Ty, I'm going to kick it over to you to get us started today.
Great, Matt. Thank you. Good to see you again. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today and share just a few bits of information about how practices can really focus on the right type of growth. And I know some of our earlier live sessions here, we talked about a few things I want to review. One of those is the patient acquisition cost. It's interesting how a lot of the practices that we initially start working with to use the Social Climb system and in other settings don't really understand what their patient acquisition cost is. They don't typically think this way. It's a very simple number, as my little diagram shows, or my little image shows here. It's how much are you spending on a given marketing campaign and how many patients were derived or that you can attribute back to that campaign. Now that denotes that you're able to track patient acquisitions back to individual campaigns. But in this case, we're talking about spending $5,000 on a campaign and getting 18 patients. So that's the very baseline here of saying, okay, I'm getting each patient for about $277. As I think then the next key point, and move to the next slide here, we also have to then consider, well, what's the lifetime value of a patient? And that lifetime value is, again, something simple. And in many business settings outside of healthcare, it's kind of the baseline for thinking about how you want to target patients and or customers and which type of customers you want. And we're going to get into that in just a minute. But let's talk about how you calculate lifetime value. It's, again, very simple. There's really 2 categories. There's the reoccurring patients that a lot of practices deal with, and then there's the more episodic cases or acute cases that other types of specialty practices deal with. So in the first case, Lifetime value of a patient is for a reoccurring patient in a practice, a primary care or some sort of practice that sees patients quite often. It's just how much do you make per visit? How many visits a year? How many years do you, on average, keep a patient? In this case, we got a little $2,300 number there saying that the lifetime value of a patient is that. We see this with acute care settings be a little different in that patients don't always return, but are often worth more. So a surgical case for a specialist, they'll typically know what their average value of, let's say, a joint replacement or some sort of surgical care is. And it's best to work off of those. And in either case, to understand what your marketing growth multiplier is, it's a simple equation from there of what's that lifetime value or that episodic value divided by the patient acquisition cost. And you always want that number to be about 3x. So every dollar you put in is giving you at least $3 back. And in some cases, the numbers that we see in reality are more like 20, 30, 50x when the marketing is done well. And one key point to that is when you're going to spend marketing dollars, spend those dollars on the types of patients that actually don't just increase your revenue, but increase your revenue with more profitable care types. So one way to do that, if we can move to the next slide, is to make sure that when you're spending marketing dollars, you are focused on the patient categories that you want more of. Every practice has a list of patient types that they want less of and patient types that they want more of. It's a reality that not everybody outside of healthcare understands happens. But if a practice could choose, they'd choose the patients that pay well, have good chance of recovery, and are in good need of the type of care the practice provides. They fit on those criteria. So one thing that we've done in the Social Client platform is we've created predictive patient targeting models. And this little example here, we're showing an orthopedics example where this practice would like to get more patients who are in need of knee care. The knee surgery group in this practice would like to up their game. They want to focus on certain types of knee care in certain zip codes. And those zip codes are then clicked on. So they ran a model here. They looked at the audience that it generated. The darker the zip codes, the higher number of people in those zip codes are in need of the care type that they want and also have the type of propensity to pay that they would like. And they've then selected 3 of those zip codes, and we're seeing 15,000 patients identified there. So of the 160,000 people that live in those zip codes, this marketing campaign is going to focus just on attracting those high-value patients. Those 15,000 people are who we believe are the most likely to turn into those high-value patients. And if the marketing is focused like this, that marketing multiplier works out very nicely for the practice. So as we are able to start attracting these patients in these categories, the key then is to get them into the practice. And that's where the kind of partnership that we're really excited about here with Clearwave allows this handoff of those patients into a self-scheduling and onboarding process that I know Lee has a lot more knowledge about than I do. So we'll kind of say we're handing the patients who we've attracted off into that process and let Lee take it from here.
Great. Thanks, Ty. Appreciate it. Like Ty said, you and the practice have done a lot of work to get the right patients in, with the right cost to acquire them and get them in. But then you've kind of created some positive problems for yourself. How do you get that line of patients, to your practice? That's the first step. How do we get them to the practice? And then you've got them on the schedule. You go to the next slide, Matt. Well, then you've created, kind of a log jam at your front desk with a lot of things that have to happen for those patients, and your staff is, limited. In a lot of places you're understaffed. So you've got all these patients that have a lot of little things that we have to take care of, because not only do we want to take care of them, we want to take care of them efficiently. So that's where technology can come in. You can move the slide, Matt. And really, we talk about growing, but it's talking about scaling, which, you can think about how are we efficient with our current patient population? If we doubled the number of patients we can see in a day to get them to the back, there's a lot of things that have to happen to make sure we're efficiently getting them in, whether it's using self-patient scheduling, which everybody loves. being able to go online at night and make your own appointment at the right time with the right doctor is something that's very beneficial to your practice. So that way they're on the books and their eligibility's already been checked. Then once they get to the practice, being able to check themselves in at a kiosk or on their phone, reminding them to show up through technology. And then just completing all the registration needs, your HIPAA compliance form, your patient intake, taking care of all of that digital front door registration work so your staff can do the clinical side and take care of those patients. There's so many benefits. So if we do our job correctly, you go ahead and move, Matt. We changed that front office look for you. We've made it where the patients are taking care of themselves. Your staff's been able to be proactive and engage the right patients where they need to. And then if we really, go ahead, Matt, if we've done our job correctly, this is a little tagline I like. What does the patient want to hear? They want to be in the waiting room taken care of. They want to hear the doctor will see you now. And that's really where your practice wants to focus, is the clinical taking care of all those patients. So if we can do everything on the front end, we've made it more efficient. We've scaled your practice for the right patients to really enhance your practice to the next level, which is hopefully what Clearwave and Social Climb can do for you together.
Awesome. Thanks, Lee. And thanks to you as well, Ty, for all of the insights. I think, really today's session was a great capstone to our 3-part series. The first 2 sessions on patient acquisition, calculating patient lifetime value and retention, a lot of those activities are really becoming table stakes for high performing practices. And I think if I think about some of the things that you all talked about today, Ty, on your portion, identifying those high value service lines, knowing your acquisition costs, and then translating that and using technology like predictive patient targeting. And then for you, Lee, thinking about how to enable technology throughout that patient flow, everything from 24/7 self-service scheduling, automating the eligibility verification process, check-in, and then ultimately collecting payments as well. Those are the things that are really going to allow practices to elevate from being, really good to truly best in class. And I think that's obviously what we want everybody tuning in today, the level that we want them to be at. So again, thanks, Ty and Lee. Just looking over our Q&A box here. Don't see any questions as of yet, but one kind of that occurred to me as we were going along here, Ty, I'll start with you. You talked about, your patient acquisition costs, aligning your marketing dollars with the most profitable service lines. Do you find when you all start working with clients that in many cases, I think most people, when they think about, focusing more on marketing, it usually means, hey, we've got to way up our marketing budget. And sometimes that's the case, but do you find oftentimes that because of the optimization that your team is able to do, that it's really that exercise of making your existing marketing dollars much more efficient versus saying, hey, we've got to double, triple our existing marketing costs?
Yeah, I think your point is well taken, that typically when a practice starts to use our platform, what they realize is they've been spending inefficiently, and they don't typically have to increase the marketing budget. They're simply focusing the budget on things that bring more of the higher value cases. And frankly, the beginning of that process is they don't know how they can use the marketing dollars to bring in the high value cases. They know what the high value cases are. They'll tell you, oh yeah, it's this patient profile and this procedure type. They just don't understand how the marketing dollars can be focused on those patient types. They'll say something like, we know that half of our marketing works, we just don't know which half of it works.
Right.
And so we don't know where to push or pull in order to get more patient types. And that's one of the first things we help them do an analysis on is, well, Let's talk to the right people so that when you do find success in attracting them, you're getting higher value cases.
Absolutely. And, question for you, Lee, is on this topic of scale. I think a lot of practices that we talk to, when they think about scale, it's like, well, gosh, I've got to staff up. How are we going to deal with an influx of patients as we add, providers or services? Would you say that, deploying some of these technologies that you mentioned, the self-service scheduling, and things like the automated check-in processes, kiosks, mobile, et cetera, do you typically hear from clients that they're able to actually mitigate some of that pain on the staffing side of having to staff way up, and not to mention, dealing with people calling out sick? Do you find that helps enable that scale that we're talking about?
Oh, sure, definitely, Matt. Thanks for the question. I mean, a lot of it is either they're short staffed today, or they just want to redeploy their staff to be more clinically proactive and spent less time checking patients in and more time where they're actually with the doctor, where the revenue is actually being generated.
Right.
So there's only so many hours in the day, but if you can eliminate the wait times up front, letting patients do things themselves, it allows your staff to focus on the patient and patient care instead of patient paperwork.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's great. And I think puts a nice endpoint on our session today. Thanks again, Lee and Ty, for your insights today. As we adjourn here, just a reminder that if you're looking for more information on today's topic or anything that we've covered in our series thus far, be sure to check out socialclimb.com and clearwaveinc.com for more resources on these topics and more, including recordings of both today's sessions and our previous sessions if you missed those. So again, really appreciate everyone joining us today. Hope everyone has a great remainder of your week, and we'll look to see you next time. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Goodbye.
Matt. Thanks, Todd.
Thanks, Matt.